My name is Kiara Rademacher. I am the Director of Accounting and Information Services for Zarnowski. We are an international exhibit services house, and basically what that means is we do trade shows. The easy way that I would say this is we do pop-up theater. Any of you ever been to the Chicago Auto Show or any of the other auto shows? If there's a GM exhibit on the floor, we did it, and about half of the other exhibits out there. So we have to deal with everything from design, build, ship, custom fabrication, warehousing and logistics, a lot of professional services. Tracking all of that as jobs. We run about 12,000 projects through the SL product a year. We're one of the largest project users on the platform out there. We also have a highly customized system, 30 custom screens, about 3,000 custom SQL objects in the system, which is why every year they wrote me into coming and talking about upgrades. Now, the lady who is always on the other end of the phone, hiding from me when I call support.
My name is Carolyn Froten, and I've been working with the SL application for over 15 years. I started with the 206 version and did the support for distribution, which would be your purchasing, order management, inventory, things along those lines. And then I was able to gradually work myself into the environment side of things with the installations, upgrades, SharePoint, the integration pieces that we're continually striving to get more of. So, yep, I'm on the troubleshooting side. She's down in the trenches.
I also happened to be a VAR for 12 years. So before I moved to what some of my colleagues call the dark side, the place with both cookies and jobs I can actually finish, I did a lot of SL upgrades. So, what are we here to talk about besides where you're from and the snow?
Well, first off, one of the things that I continually run into is the difference between migrating and upgrading. So we just wanted to touch on that just a little bit at the beginning of our presentation today, just to kind of set that standard. What not to do.
That sounds an awful lot like that TV show, What Not to Wear.
It's entertaining, but it has a lot of really good points.
All right.
Where to start. Inevitably, when you've got something that daunting in front of you, it's hard to know exactly where to start with these upgrades. And basic upgrade planning, what you want to make sure that you keep track of as you go along. So, are you migrating or are you upgrading? What you really need to do, you need to understand the difference between the two, because it's very confusing if you're calling in for support or if you have your meeting already started and you go down the road using the terminology of migrating, but you're actually trying to upgrade, or vice versa. So what's the difference? Really, migrating is when you are taking your existing SL and moving it and not changing the version to a different system. So you might be upgrading your SQL from one version to another. You may be upgrading your server from one version to another, but your SL is being migrated because the version is not changing from one system to the next.
So I have a question for you. How many of you are on SL 2011? How many of you are still on SL 7? Okay, anybody on SL 6.5? Do I hear 6?
Do I hear 5.5?
Do I hear 2.08? I think there is actually a site still running that out there.
I was going to say, if you said 4.1, I was going to climb under the curtain.
I skipped it on purpose, really. So for all those of you, migrating versus upgrading, I'm actually getting ready to change my SQL server. We're decommissioning one of our servers and moving to another one. Migration or upgrade? Show of hands for upgrade? Show of hands for migrate. I think they got it.
Yep, it's going to be a migrate. So an upgrade, of course, is then when you're going to change the version. So if you're going from 7.0 to 2011, 2011 to 2011 FP1, or so forth, because that version is going to be changing. And there's different tasks that you need to take into consideration for each one. But we're just going to mainly focus on the upgrade piece today for ours. But just some notes for the migration. If you are looking to migrate your systems, because inevitably SQL servers go down, your main servers go down, and you need to be able to have that set up. Should I install the application on the new server or just copy over the files from my current server?
Votes for copy the files. Okay, you guys are smarter than we are, all right? When I inherited my current company, I had a system administrator whose definition of bringing up a new terminal server involved copying all the files over and then doing a registry export and import. Yeah, I rebuilt all those terminal servers after I got there. We really, really, really want to reinstall the application, not just copy your files, except...
But this is kind of a trick question because you kind of want to do both. You want to reinstall SL onto the new server, but there's going to be files in your current application production environment that you want to copy over. For example, if you're still running FRX, you want to make sure you bring over that sys data. Your user reports, that's going to be where all of your custom reports have been saved into. You want to make sure you bring those across. If you have any custom files, a lot of times those are going to be in the root of your SL application folder directory. You want to make sure those come over as well. So it takes a little bit of homework, but it's kind of a trick question. You got a little bit of both in there. Do I have to test the migration prior to moving everything? What do you think?
Well, I'll tell you what my users think.
If it runs in my current environment.
I know what my users think, and they think the testing is a waste of time. What do you guys think? Test it? It depends.
On? Oh.
It depends on your level of risk tolerance.
Yeah.
However, accountants are by definition conservative and risk averse, and we test everything. If for no other reason than if we go back one bullet point here, if you are missing an executable or if you happen to have a report like a customized AP check that's in the wrong folder, you're not going to know you missed it until you test.
Do I have to reinstall all my ISV or third parties?
Do I want them all?
You're at a perfect opportunity where you're migrating from one environment into another. If it's something that you invested in thinking that it would be useful and you're not using it, this is an opportunity where you don't have to.
However, I will tell you there is one trick to this. I have seen customizations and custom programs that use tables that belong to third-party products, and you don't know they're out there, which takes you back one bullet point to the testing. If you're going to decommission a third-party product that you're not using the product anymore, you need to make very, very certain nobody has hijacked any of the data fields in those tables before you get rid of it, or you may be in for just a little bit of a surprise. So I do everything on remote applications. So my universe lives in RDS. So, hey, support lady, it's 5 o'clock on a Friday, and I'm doing a migration, and I'm dialing, and everybody at Plumline is now IMing around going, oh my goodness, it's her. Who wants to stay on the phone? Do I have to reinstall my client workstations?
Actually, yes. You do want to reinstall your workstations. Reason being is during the SL client install, it's writing to your registry on that workstation. And it's even though in the install of the client, it shows the physical path to the server that you mapped, in the registry, it actually uses a UNC path, so it's going back to that server's name. So you want to make sure you uninstall and then reinstall after creating a new map drive.
Fabulous.
So,
how many of you are on SL 2011 Feature Pack 1? Okay. How many of you have been out and seen something amazing that you want to go back to your office and get your hands on that's in Feature Pack 1? How about those new web apps?
For Service Pack 2.
Yeah, all right.
Now, do know that if you're running SL 2011 or 2011 SP1, you will need to uninstall, reinstall FP1, then install SP2. So that's a bit of a trek, but do make sure to note that.
So new features, that's the first reason, if you can flip slides, that we want to upgrade. But there are a couple more reasons why. How many of you are going to newer 64-bit workstations? Okay. How about wanting to upgrade the server side of your environment? Maybe have a system administrator that's really sick of maintaining that Windows 2003 Standard Edition non-R2 server out there and wants it out of his domain. In my case, it's a his. In some cases, it could be a hers. Keeping up with the hardware stack, keeping up with the software stack, getting to take advantages of things like SQL 2012, SQL reporting services. Amazing reasons for getting your system upgraded.
Absolutely, or even SharePoint 2013.
Now, my absolute favorite, however, I love ripping customizations out of systems. It is a near and dear to my heart process. I've succeeded to do about 10% of the ones on my site, many of which were built before some of the functionality existed. And in our next upgrade, we will be ripping out probably 40% more of them. So for me, this is a really key reason to upgrade. When they give me new features and functionality that means I can get rid of a customization, that means my next upgrade is that much easier. So I want to get rid of the custom stuff and get upgraded. So let's talk about what happens when I go to upgrade. First of all, we got to start somewhere. Okay? Now, we have this phrased as a question, but I believe we have a couple slides on the documentation later, don't we?
Absolutely. So just as a point of what's out there for you. Do I know and understand the system requirements?
What are system requirements?
That is basically to be what SL requires for it to run and be installed on. Perfect example, SQL. SQL comes with a free Express Edition, or you have Standard and Enterprise.
Wait a minute, I can use a free version of SQL?
Only if you're going to use it solely for SharePoint.
Oh.
But for SL, you have to have Enterprise or Standard. So those are just little things that you need to make sure that when you're reading through that system requirements guide, you make note of and make sure that your IT staff is aware of it. Now, I won't promise that you won't fall asleep when reading these materials.
I'll promise you will.
But yeah, they're very important. You want to make sure to read through them.
So, Carolyn, where do we want to start?
Well, let's start looking closer at upgrading then.
All right.
Get this party started. So for your major components, focus on what you know. Trying to imagine or hypothesize what you don't know about your environment is going to drive you crazy. Start with what you do know. How many workstations do you have? How do they connect to SL? What servers do you have it installed on? What version of SQL? Just little things, and even your functionality within SL. Who uses SL? Try and work with them in what they do in SL.
We also want to, and we'll get into more detail on this in a little bit, we need to talk about testing, why we care. We need to talk about one of the most important critical things of project planning that gets ignored, which are multiple go, no-go decision points. Are we ready to move forward or not? And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we need to pay attention with during go live. Now, even though we made this a nice, pretty linear graphic, it's not really so linear, and we've got a better one a little bit further on.
Absolutely. So where do we start?
Well, I know there are a couple of really important secrets to making an upgrade work. Mm-hmm. They're easy, but they're things people like to ignore. So what's our first one?
First one is planning.
Oh, no. Wait a minute. You're going to make me plan this thing?
Yes.
I just want to go click, 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 follow the bouncing dots, and I'm done, right?
No, you are going to have to put some actual resources towards planning the entire process. And that means getting everybody in your company involved. Not maybe every single individual, but at least a resource and a reference from each department that's using SL so that you can make sure that this upgrade is not going to adversely affect any of them.
Hang on a minute, though. I've got a day job. How many of you guys have a full-time day job? So how am I going to do this at the same time?
Well, that's where the whole planning comes in, so that you can try and find that balance so that as you're entering data into one side, you can enter a couple of those transactions into the other testing environment and making sure that those flow through with your process.
I want to call my VAR and have them do it for me and just have it turnkey.
In all honesty, your upgrade, it's your data. Your data, that's your responsibility. And you're the one that's going to have to work on this system after your VAR leaves. So you want to make sure that you own this.
So every time that we do this session, there are a couple of key points we want to, joking aside, bring out. Whose upgrade is this? VARs don't answer. Okay, how many customers do I have in the room? Whose upgrade is it? Hands in the air. Own your upgrade. Your VAR, they're going to get paid. The worst that happens is you're going to get mad at them and change resellers. It's your environment, your job on the line, your data. it's your upgrade. You don't have to know how to do every detail, but you have to be engaged and involved in the process. And that's why we're going to talk about what's involved and the types of things that you should do. If you do nothing else but take away from this session things you should be talking with your VAR about on your next upgrade, then we've done what we need to do.
And trust me, from a support standpoint, consulting, VAR, we're your tools. Use us. But ultimately, again, you're the one that's going to have to use the system once everything is upgraded and going forward.
So let's talk about some of the basic upgrade planning process pieces. We've talked a little bit, and we're going to talk a little bit more detail about infrastructure requirements. What do I need under the hood? Where do I find that? We're going to talk about the things to remember on what's affected. And customizations, customizations, customizations.
Also, going forward, your testing environment, your production environment, all the key components as you move through this planning that you want to make sure that you keep track of.
And then lastly, we're going to harp on the next three. Making a decision, taking the time to stop and decide, is it time to move to the next step of this process? What am I going to do about training? That box that everybody likes to forget because, you know, it's intuitive and you'll all get it. And how am I going to manage the things that are going to come up during the process?
And I know a lot of the times when we get brought in on the training part of it, we only cover the features so that your users are familiar with what's new in the product that they're going to be using. We're not going to teach them everything that they already know. We can, you know, your VAR can do all of that for you.
Well, but back up one slide for me for a second. Let's talk about training. My system is 12 years old. A lot of my users learned because Bob taught Fred how to teach Jane, how to teach Christy, how to teach Marianne, how to click, 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 type, type, type. And they have no clue why they're doing what they're doing. Anybody else have those people in your environment? All right. An upgrade is a great time to take the time to go back and revisit things and teach them why they're doing what they're doing and get them to be consumers and users of a system, not rote key punch monkeys. Okay? But we talked about planning. All right. That means I got to break out Microsoft Project, doesn't it?
No.
And have a monstrous project. Oh, wait a minute. That's not that complicated.
No, it's not. Use the tools that you've got. You don't have to go invest in something special, something unique, something designed one of a kind just for doing upgrades. This is Excel. Gives you an idea, a place to start. If you're currently running Business Portal and you have SharePoint, SharePoint has a template that you can actually create to record issues as your users are testing. And you can keep track of those for your IT group. You can go out to Microsoft, the website, and go into their templates where you can get clip art and things like that. If you type in issues, they actually have templates for issue tracking or
see, I can tell your support side's coming out because you're all the way down in issue management, and I'm back in planning the upgrade.
But yeah.
There's a couple of key takeaways I want you to have here about this. Number one, those tasks are extremely specific, and there is a reason for this. As you go through your planning process and building your test system and testing, you're going to update this document with every single change you make to your system. Do not assume that when your VAR shows up on Saturday morning or early Friday afternoon to start doing your upgrade, that every 127 different items that you guys addressed during testing is buried in somebody's brain somewhere. Go back, update your plan, make sure you have it recorded at a level of detail that if the guy working with you on that upgrade is out sick, the lady who comes in to replace you can figure out what they're supposed to do. There is nothing worse during a live upgrade than having a user go, but we fixed that during test, and now it's broken again. Second thing, who's responsible? What gets done when someone is going to do it? All right. Somebody's got to be on the hook. And they got to be on a hook. And what happens when you are going to do it eventually? Yeah. All right. So just some key planning elements for you guys to consider in a simple format that you can use for tracking it. Now, we talked about cyclical. This process, we said at the beginning, start with what you know and update as you learn. This is really how this process is going to work. Don't spend a week doing nothing but trying to remember every little detail you think you know. Jot down everything you've got and then start documenting as you work through your testing process. You will end up with a plan that works without spending a lot of time stressing out trying to figure out what you might have missed and make it perfect. How often does perfect ever get deployed? Never. Excellent.
And this is also a good point where when you're starting your meeting and doing your upgrade, going back to that spreadsheet just prior to this slide, this is where you would want a member from your financial team, a member from your warehouse, a member from your management staff, sitting in a round table, just discussing how they use SL so that you can build that spreadsheet, so you can build that first cog of what do you know. Then as you start going through the process, that's where you add in those missing components.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about a lot of documentation resources and things to read with a large cup of coffee.
Very large. Basically, your documentation, luckily enough, it pretty much comes with the download of SL 2011 or any version that's actually released. You've got your summary of changes doc. In support, we call it a SOC doc, if you ever hear that. Your release notes. Your summary of changes, that's literally what it is. If you have any screens or reports that are listed in that document, pay very close attention to make sure that if those changes were made to those screens or reports and those are customized for you, make point to test those when you do your upgrade. Your release notes. A lot of times people skim over this very quickly, but it usually has a lot of really neat tips and tricks in it that you may not realize are in there. Your system requirements guide, again, you want to read that from start to finish. Make sure that you cover all your bases so that when you do your install, you're not left with having to reinstall or restructure a server. Same with your web applications. That's for your web apps, web services, SharePoint, Business Portal. Make sure to read through those documents. And of course, your installation guide. The documentation team for Microsoft Dynamics SL painstakingly goes through that install doc to make sure that you've got updated screenshots and steps as you go through the process. And review your critical hotfixes and knowledge base articles. What do you think would be the easiest way for them to be able to do that?
Well, I'd log on to Customer Source and take a look at what's out there and then determine whether I think I need it. But the easiest way is I'd go call my VAR and tell them to read it and tell me which ones to apply. Well, I wouldn't. I used to be a VAR, but most customers would.
The only bad thing about that is your VAR manages several customers. They can't know exactly what you do and what hotfix or update may apply to your particular environment. If you know that you're going to be going to 2011 SP2, for example, if you go out to the knowledge base and look at all of the available hotfixes for 2011 and newer, you can go to the section specifically for anything that's being put on top of SP2, read through those descriptions, and only apply the ones that are going to pertain to your particular processing needs.
Wait a minute. Why don't I just solve the problem and apply all of them?
I had a graphic that was sent to me, 99 bugs in the system, 99 bugs in the system, fix one. Now I have 127 bugs in the system. Don't fix something that's not broken. Just fix the things that you need to have taken care of.
Okay, now you're making sense. All right, we got more documents for you. However, we're not reading this one to you.
Nope, we made it nice and pretty so that as you can scan through it, it doesn't hurt your eyes. But basically, it's just what the system requirements state.
Now, you have some sneaky stuff to talk about on that one, though, on the SharePoint side, don't you? Unofficial, sneaky things that they'll find out later if they go to the right session.
Yes, in fact, Jeff let the cat out of the bag.
Did he?
I believe it is within a week or two, they are going to officially note that SharePoint 2013 will be supported with Business Portal. However, you do need to uninstall and reinstall your Business Portal to the version that will work with SharePoint 2013, because the one that's out there right now is solely configured with 2010. But that is in the horizon, so that's another little treat as to why you might want to migrate your systems if you're already on the most current, or another incentive to upgrade.
Fabulous. So let's get down to a little bit of nitty-gritty. stuff that this upgrade might impact.
I'm only upgrading SL, though.
Well, it all depends on your SL install. So I'll give you an example from my environment. And I'm going to jump around on this slide while you guys are reading it. 30 custom modules, all of which do different things. That integrations and interfaces on the bottom last one. I have a whole bunch of data going back and forth between my systems and other systems. When I inherited my environment, I actually didn't know where those integrations were. I had to do a little bit of SQL trapping on SQL connections to go find out what was actually connecting into and out of my database to find out what was going on behind the scenes. If you did not install your system and you have data moving around the company, you may not know where it is, but you need to find out before you do your upgrade, or something is going to go crash and burn. Third-party ISV solutions. Okay, how many of you have a third-party product in your system? May I suggest that before you go do an upgrade, you make sure that you get the version from them that runs with your current product. Usually they're good about keeping them up to date, but back in my consulting days, there were a couple times we had to delay upgrades because ISV solutions weren't ready yet. Before you start doing your entire testing and planning process, make sure you get all of the versions that work with the version you're going to. It'll save you a lot of time.
And headache.
Absolutely. So we're not going to read too much into this, but we wanted to make sure that you'd seen that there's an awful lot of things that are part of SL that you would not necessarily think are part of SL until you've been through a couple painful upgrades. So we're going to drill down a little bit into customizations.
So basically you want to identify what screens have customizations. If you're used to using the SL screens, you probably don't notice if there's an asterisk up in the top left-hand corner of your screen. That's going to tell you whether or not that screen is customized. A nice place to go is under the administrative menu. There's an export customization screen that you can go in and see all of the customizations that are in your system on all the different screens. One thing to make note of, you're going to see them in different, levels. You're going to have self-level, all user level, group level. A lot of sites will take the opportunity when upgrading to clear out all of those self-level customizations because really they just break stuff when you go to try and test.
That's level 500 for those of you who want to get into SQL and play with it.
Yes. But that's how you can identify what screens are customized.
So the next thing you're going to do once you've figured out what you've got is decide whether you want to keep them. Now, I am going to make one more comment about identifying customizations. Anybody here have a really heavily customized site? Okay. Are you guys members of the SL users group? All right. You need to be.
Yep.
What you can do is if you join the SL user group and you go to www.msdslug.com, Microsoft Dynamics SL users group, that's our short version, and you go look at the past sessions. Go look for one that I did in Baltimore in 2011. There is an entire toolkit for finding every single thing that is custom in your system, down to custom message files, custom PVs, you name it, it's out there. Takes a little bit of work in SQL, but that's available for you, and it makes life a lot easier when you at least know what you're looking at.
Then your steps to upgrade those customizations. Once you identify them, then you have a little bit more to go on. Is it something you want to move forward with? Is it something that you need to focus on upgrading?
Now, I'm going to tell you one other thing from my VAR years. I spent quite a while at one site trying to get a customization that had broken during upgrade while we were testing to work, because the guy I was working directly for told me it was broken. After a couple of days of fighting with this and looking at the code, I really couldn't honestly figure out how it had ever worked in the first place. And I went back and talked to the users, and it hadn't worked since it was originally written. This is something, particularly on a site that you've inherited or you're not familiar with. Actually make sure stuff really broke, and it's not that they're just now complaining about it. Okay? The other thing that's interesting, I'll tell you my other story when we get into testing, because it's more fun there.
Okay.
So, a few other things that you need to take a look for and make sure you've got.
You want to look for your custom report templates. Those are not going to be very easy to find, but Kiara's tool does identify those for you.
And the reality is that they can be reverse engineered, but what makes more sense with the report templates, in all honesty, usually, is to completely delete them and then recreate them, because if there are any schema changes in your upgrade, they're not going to work properly anyway.
And this is where that SOC doc comes in, the summary of changes. If you can identify the reports that have been changed compared to what you might have templates in the system for or custom versions of that report for, then it makes it quicker for you to identify where you might need to have extra testing or make any modifications. Mm-hmm. Your possible value lookups, where would they go to look for that?
Well, if they use my tool, they'll find them. Mm-hmm. Realistically, PVs, I'm going to get very technical here for a minute, are a pain in the butt to determine when they've been customized. Unless somebody actually kept a really good record of everything that they imported over the top of them, the only way to actually figure out what's different is to reverse engineer a whole lot of binary code that was written by Visual Basic, and then it's messy. So if you have custom PVs and you don't have records, you need to go steal my tool off the user group site, because that's the only way I've ever found to pull those back out. It's not perfect, but it'll get you probably 98% there, unless you've got some really weird corruption or custom code in there.
Your custom messages, a lot of times you can find those in the message.csv that's in the root of your SL application folder. Or hopefully you have any custom ones in there as well. So if that file has been modified, just kind of review it and compare it to when you install your test environment. Before you move anything over, make your comparisons. And that also will help you in identifying some of these.
The other place you're going to find your PVs and your templates, by the way, is when your users test, because I guarantee you if they're wedded to information that they're used to hitting F3 and seeing or looking at a template, if you actually make them test it, they're going to figure out what they're missing, and they will tell you very quickly.
Absolutely. And the other one that is forgotten quite often are modifications to your business portal. A lot of your users, they're just used to seeing it the way that they see it. In a test environment, they're going to notice if something's missing. But for Business Portal, you can usually get away with making a backup of your current environment's Business Portal directory, make also a copy of your web config file, and tuck those away where they're going to be safe. Because sometimes you're going to need to go in and compare those pages to move those customizations over.
Now, see, I cheat. I run a diff tool against both of them beforehand and look to see. So one thing you can do, or you can have your VAR do, one of the nice things about Business Portal is that most of the code is either JavaScript or HTML, plain text, not compiled. So you can take a stock installation of Business Portal, and you can take your current one, and there are what are called diff, D-I-F-F tools that will go and run comparisons and tell you what's different in those files. So you go looking for things where the dates aren't the same as the originals, and you can find what's been changed. That's incredibly useful information.
Absolutely.
All right?
So your screen, third-party products, and your in-house modules. Review with your user to determine if it's still in use. This goes back to if you don't use it or if it never worked in the first place, don't spin your wheels and waste your time in digging into it. Review new functionality in SL 2011. Does that new functionality replace what you had customizations for?
Or does it break your customization?
Yes, that's another
which
one.
I've also seen happen.
You all basically flag your customizations as, should this be retired or should this be upgraded?
So now we're about to get to my favorite slide in this entire deck. Well, not quite. The slide everybody hates and runs away from. Quick, cover your eyes and don't look. Training. So what's the most important thing you can do during your upgrade, or one of them? Train your people. What is the fastest way to have frustrated, upset users who swear that your upgrade was horrible even though technically it was perfect? Have them sit down on go live morning and not be able to figure out how to do their jobs. And how many of your bosses, the first budget they start cutting when their VAR gives you back your quote is the training budget, because they say, well, we'll just do that in-house. And then don't. There are several different places that you can train. I suggest all of them if you can manage it. Train your people before they start their initial testing so that they aren't completely lost. Use the testing process as a way to get them a little bit more familiar with what's a little bit different and with the look and feel. turn around and train them again right before you go live. And then schedule some reinforcing training immediately afterwards in which you sit down and start also dealing with questions about new processes and things. This is a plan you want to do alongside. You can incorporate it into your upgrade plan, but sometimes it's easiest to do it alongside it as a second tab in that Excel workbook. Document who's there. Make them show up. Decide how you're going to deliver it. If you are like me and you have 14 or 15 offices around the world, actually I think we're up to 18 now, and you're going to be delivering your training over the web, figure out how you're getting them away from their desk and having them pay attention to what they're actually trained and not surfing the web, answering email, or taking phone calls while they're on their training.
Make sure they're engaged.
Make sure they are engaged. And then figure out when you're going to schedule it. And if your boss says, we don't have time to train, your response is, then we probably don't have time to upgrade. Because if you do not teach people what to do with this new system, your life is going to be really miserable for a while. And if you are the boss that likes to skimp on training, stop doing it.
It causes frustration for your users, which then you get the negative feedback from that, and then you automatically figure, well, there's something wrong with the product because my users aren't happy. And then it trickles all the way through to where nobody wants to work with SL because it's just too difficult. So this is a way of kind of combating that.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about testing. Okay? We're going to have to speed things up a little bit. We're getting a little behind. Testing. Okay. How long do I test? I test until I'm done. Right? I test until I know it's working. We test. It breaks. We fix. No, we don't go live. We come back. We test. Something else breaks. We fix. No, we don't go live. We come back. I could dance all day long. Okay? We wait until we test and we aren't breaking anymore before we move forward. Why? Well, the number of people who don't do this, I've got to ask the question. Okay, because it's the only way you're going to have a system that's working properly.
And you don't want to go live and have it not working.
Right.
You don't want to be down. You don't want to be able to process your financials. So the incentive is to make sure that when you go live, you're live.
So when you test, you want to do your best to test in the same environment you're going live in. If you have 6 servers in your environment, and one's an application server, and one is a SQL server, and one has the SL product on it, and one is a remote desktop server on it, and one is a business portal web server, and one of them is running Process Manager, set up 6 test boxes, because I can guarantee you that if you don't, somewhere in there, that single server thing you built on a laptop in a corner to use your testing on isn't going to be able to talk to all those other servers when you go live. Take the time to try to duplicate the environment that you're going to be moving to and install everything. Okay? So a couple of these slides we're going to go through quickly, but I want you to think about this. You get several layers of testing. Your admin users are going to test first just to make sure like it loads and you can log in and things like that. Then you want to make sure your users can actually get in and do that separately. There is nothing more frustrating to a user than they sit down to test and they can't get into the system and that's their first experience. So what I do is we have, I'm testing your security testing, where they know up front it might not work and their expectation is we're here to troubleshoot and make sure you're going to be able to get into the test system. Takes away any frustration right up front because they know it might not work and they're helping me out. Then we're going to train. Remember we talked about that. Then we're going to test, and I'm going to give you the real secret to making your users test a little bit later. Okay? Some people like to do a lot of before and after data validation. How much of that you do depends on how paranoid you are. I have seen situations where it catches problems. I've seen situations where it's a waste of time. Probably going to want to do some of it. SL tends to be extremely good about not breaking the existing data. You're more likely to have a process break than a data corruption issue on an upgrade. You also need to track, and we're going to talk about issue tracking here in a minute, anything you need to modify that comes out of your training or out of your testing. And then you're going to go back and do what? Update your upgrade plan, right? Remember my gears and my cycle? So we'll show this a little bit differently on the next slide. Cyclical. I can't beat this to death enough.
Can you see a common theme? in the slides, testing, planning. You can't get enough of it.
So we're going to get you now to the real second secret here. How many of you have ever done what my company did on its last upgrade? Now, I was actually the consultant on this job at the time. I was not employed there. And I, like a good consultant, went to the director of IT and I said, IT director, I need your users to test your systems. And I need you to tell me when they're done. And I helped them build their test scripts. And we had some amazing test plans. And everything was going, in my brain, the way I thought it should, at least on the testing front. There's a whole lot of other horror stories that happened here. I have been through the official worst upgrade ever. Hey, when you lose 3 servers and your IT director has a stroke on upgrade weekend, it's the worst upgrade ever.
Yeah.
Which also explained some of the other problems that happened going in. However, users, test, test, test. We got a whole test team. They're going to test. We went live. Nobody had ever run an invoice through the system. Nobody had ever cut a check. Nobody had actually verified that anything went anywhere. Hence, secret number 2, supervise your users. I do not care what they tell me. I care that I watched them test, that they did not click past an error message because in their brains they said, well, they'll know about that and they'll fix it before the upgrade, and that they are willing to answer this question at the bottom of the screen and tell me that they agree in writing that they can actually do their job the way the system works right now. And if they're not willing to do that, we're not ready to go live. Because if they aren't willing to do that, there is something wrong, also known as they didn't test. Hard-earned experience, folks. Large company, over 100 users. Nobody in the company had run an invoice through the system from start to finish.
No one had printed a check either.
Nobody had printed a check. And as a consultant, I can't tell you how many times I watched this happen.
And I believe it was the version at that point that SL had changed the format of the check in that release. So when nobody had tested it, nobody realized that they weren't going to be able to run checks when they went live.
Fortunately, that was a different client.
Ah.
So those did not happen to the same client. So go, no-go decision points. They're very simple, but you need to have them. This is the point where you schedule time to stop and say, are we ready to do this? And by putting them in your plans, they force you to think about where you're at. It's okay to say we're not ready. Carolyn, is there any reason, any technical reason why I have to go live at the end of the year?
The only reason that I have ever come across in the years that I've done support is if the client is currently on a version that is not going to have the year-end updates that they need in order to move into the next year and close their books. That is the only reason.
So if I want to take my system and I have payroll in it live on March 3rd, I can.
Yeah.
And my payroll's all going to be there, right?
Yep, your payroll's going to be there, your IDs are going to be there, you're going to have an update to be able to apply. You should be good.
Okay. And I don't have to worry about quarter end if I'm upgrading. So I can upgrade anytime I want.
Yes.
All right. Take that back home and feed it to your CFOs. And if you are the CFO, remember that it's okay if you need an extra week or if you need an extra month. Better to get it right than have a bad upgrade. Much better. Okay. So we've talked about this a little bit.
Yep. So let's go ahead and the go, no-go decision point. Don't, as Kiara was saying, don't be afraid to stop. Regroup. Make sure you have all your ducks in a row. All your I's dotted, your T's crossed. Critical at the end of the test phase, it's only critical if you need those year-end updates in order to move forward. You don't want to, granted, I will say, you don't want to do all of the testing, all the implementation, get everything ready to go, and then take a 2-month sabbatical.
But that's not what we're talking about.
That's not what we're talking about.
We're talking about needing more time for another round of testing.
Right.
All right, so
be prepared.
We're ready to go. And I'm sitting there with my VAR, and my VAR wants to get paid because they're on some kind of a payment plan, and they want to go live this weekend. And I know I'm not ready. Whose decision is it? It's yours.
Because who owns your upgrade?
Okay?
You do.
Your VAR will reschedule. It may not be at your convenience. That's okay. They have a business to run. But it's all right if you need to reschedule resources.
It's your decision.
Okay, so let's talk about your favorite topic.
Yes.
What do we do when we find
My bread
something
and
in
butter.
testing that goes wrong?
Basically, you want to have a central area to put these issues, which would be your SharePoint, a spreadsheet, someplace where you can accumulate that information. I've even had sites where they create an Outlook folder where they put all of the emails of reported issues in. Because in Outlook, you can search. So if they search an error number or something like that, they can usually identify it. Just make sure that if somebody sends you a screenshot, when you reply to them, you write out what is written in that screenshot so that you do have that search functionality. Because, of course, nothing can search a screenshot.
So, but don't I have to pay for SharePoint?
No.
I
SharePoint
don't?
Foundation.
It's free?
It is. SharePoint Foundation is free. SharePoint Services you have to pay for, but Foundation has the issues template. It has all the functionality you can. If you want it to be on your own workstation where you don't have everybody accessing it, it can be downloaded for free. Foundation, install it, meeting the system requirements guide, information, and you're good to go.
Okay, I want to see what this free thing looks like.
It is really sweet.
All right,
I love
show us.
2013. Come here, George. This is SharePoint 2013. Very easy look and feel. What I did is I went into the apps, because in 2013, yes, you can go shopping online and get your apps. You create your apps for your issue tracking. Once you add it, poof, it's literally there that quickly. You don't have to do any additional coding, any additional setup configuration. And then on the right here, you can see what the format looks like, whether you can actually enter in the title of your issue, whether or not it's inactive, if it's closed, the information for the description, as well as comments, if there's a specific due date that the issue needs to be resolved by. This is all in the template.
There's always a specific due date by when it needs to be resolved.
Yes. I know in our office, the due date for it to be resolved by is the same date that it's issued. So, but it's a great repository to be able to track all of your issues and make sure that they're right there where you need them.
Fabulous. How many of you have used SharePoint to track things during an upgrade before? It's a great tool. You've got it. You may as well use it.
Mm-hmm.
So
And it's free.
So let's start wrapping up, and let's talk about go live. We've finally decided we're ready to go.
You want to follow that upgrade plan during the live upgrade. What's the point of putting all the effort into it if you're not going to follow it? Check off each step as you go. Make sure that you've got all your I's dotted, T's crossed. Give yourself enough time. Don't say that you're going to allocate 2 hours to do the upgrade because that's how much time you think it took you. Give yourself 4 hours, 5 hours, just in case.
I like whole weekends.
Yes. Make sure their users are out of the system.
We've had people not kick their users out of the system during an upgrade. But
Yeah.
what if things go wrong?
Have a failback system. If you know that if something went wrong, know that you can roll right back to your original production environment so when your users come in, they don't skip a beat. They're right on track. They're not dead in the water. Be willing to stop the upgrade if necessary. If something is going terribly wrong, again, have that failback.
So let's talk about the thing that everybody uses as their fallback plan. They don't have one. And let me tell you what actually happened during an actual upgrade. Day one, server goes down. Oh, put me back on the last one.
Okay.
I like that slide. All right. Server goes down. Got to replace a hard drive on a server. Now, fortunately, these were not my servers, so they were under spec, which was already a problem. Next thing happens, we lose another server. All right. I'm starting to get worried. I'm sitting here trying to run an upgrade. I've got an upgrade that isn't finishing because this time I had a motherboard go out on another server. Next thing that happens is I've got to run a project integrity check on a database, and we're about 22 hours in over a Memorial Day weekend, and it's not done yet. Okay? We tested all of this. It all should have worked, and at this point, I'm really desperately trying to get a hold of my customer and say, we need to go back. And then the best part happened. The IT director, or not the IT director, the sysadmin, gets a hold of me and says, oh, I didn't check the backups we made, and I have no backups, and we couldn't go back. Let me tell you, worst next 6 months of my life were spent fixing that site. I strongly recommend that not only do you have a fallback plan, but next slide, please. Assume that Murphy hates your guts and is out to get you on upgrade weekend. And make sure that you have actually tested your fallback plan. Your backups are only as good as the last successful restore you had. And if you are not personally the one that restored them, you darn well better sure trust the people who are going to restore them for you. So, we're done. We're upgraded. We're finished, right? Party time. No.
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 Nope. Close, but no cigar. You want to sit down and figure out what went well. You need to reward yourself for what went well. But you also need to identify things that could have been done better, whether that was getting your users engaged in their testing, what could have been done differently so that the next time you upgrade, you can implement it. This is a perfect opportunity where everything's still fresh in your mind to sit down and put all that into your upgrade plan.
Now, if you've been updating as you go, updating that plan there's not too much that you're going to have to do. It's not a 6-hour or 6-day process. But it's worth taking the time to sit back, pat yourselves on the back, plan for next time, because you know there's going to be, next meeting, we're going to have a new service pack out, a new feature pack, something new, really cool we want. And we don't want to be looking at this and going, oh my God, I've got to upgrade again.
And I'll tell you, in the upgrades that I've done, we usually will have a weekly 15-minute touch base, what's going on, how things are going. And that's when we update the upgrade plan. It's not a giant chunk of time out of your day. Once everything is said and done, that's usually about a half an hour just to, see what went wrong, give people opportunities to, now that they're in the live environment that may have been missed during the testing. But really, it doesn't take a lot of time, but it's very important time to take.
All right. That is it. Questions? You're mostly still awake.
Mm-hmm. So you do end up in a live upgrade that does have makeups. And I've never done an upgrade where you can't get past, even like what you went through with no backup. I mean, eventually you can get through.
Well, we got past it.
Yeah.
But in your situation, that is the reason for that iterative testing process, because you go through your testing, you do your fixes.
Right.
You don't go forward now. If you've had to fix something, you go back and you retest for exactly that reason, because fix A may break item B, and just because you've already tested this process does not mean it's still working after you've loaded those fixes.
Because you never know what else is using those tables and database objects that aren't necessarily in that process.
And that's the reason why we emphasize that iterative testing process. People really want testing to be linear. They really want to say, well, we tested that and we know it's solid, and well, it's not. Don't assume it is. Assume it's going to break. Assume anything you load and anything you change is going to break your system and retest. And this is where your user community need to be your best friends. Bribe them, feed them donuts, feed them bagels, feed them tamales. We have tamale Fridays at my office. Feed them coffee. Convince them it's in their best interest to try to break it now so that their lives are better afterwards, and make them your best allies. Because if there's one group of people out there that can break the system for you and find it quickly, it's your user community. Any other questions? Ma'am?
I just had a question about, there's another session, remix upgrade this afternoon. Is that the same, or is it a different?
What time?
3:30.
I believe that's an interactive.
Yeah, that's the interactive.
Yep. Myself and another customer, Dwight, is going to be in that session, and it's just kind of a round table where people can talk, discuss, run questions, things like that.
Okay.
Yes, and then they're back to back, so if you're in one and you still want to stay and discuss, we're going to be there.
All right, and if you're interested in talking about customizations, There's a 5 o'clock roundtable discussion on customizations that right now I think I'm the only person on the hook for, but unless my partner decides to not or get out of another commitment.
I was going to say, if we got you here, we're going to take advantage of you.
Oh, come on. You guys always do. Okay, any other questions? Go forth then. Fill out your evaluations. They really, really do matter.
Yep. Hope
Tell
you're
us
able
what
to
we
get
do
something in
well.
here.
Tell us what we can do better, and I hope this has been useful for you.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.